Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Heavy on the Mr. Jim, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, buddy. We got a hell of a show for everybody today. One of the most unique King of the Ring 2000, as we know. And it was a very unique event, to say the very least, which we'll get into.
Well, I got to tell you, I have had a lot of fun just being able to sort of block out the real world and talk old wrestling with you. And we hope that that's what you guys at home are doing with the podcast. And we hope today is no different with King of the Ring 2000. This one went down 20 years ago today at the Fleet Center in Boston, Mass. We've got 15,388 fans in the building. 14,464 of those paid a gate of $865,778. It does a 1.19 buy rate, which is around 6.12 million. Jim, you've been in the wrestling business a long time by this point. Did you ever imagine that you would regularly see $865,000 gates for a promotion?
Oh no. Especially when I got my start at the Irish O'Neill Boys Club in Shreveport, and admission was free, and capacity was about maybe 100. So no, heck no, Conrad. The business was hot, and good time to be in the business, good time to watch the business. As we talked about on our last week's show, teasing this show. This show is loaded. I use this term probably too frequently. It's an all-star team. It's an all-star. It's like you dotted up and down, and the stories were unique. The only thing I guess missing was Stone Cold. So, and The Rock this is an era where The Rock really started evolving to the next level and beyond. So it's a pretty cool booking. I thought the main event was kind of cool. It was a huge tournament, and it's never been tried. It was never tried before. It hasn't been tried since. But the tournament, usually 8 guys, 16, something like 16-man single elimination tournament, get you 7 matches. But 32 guys is a lot of content. So it was interesting. It's a fun show. And the thing about Boston I always think about is that Harvey Whippleman used to run out and get errands, help everybody out. Need this, I need a roll of tape, I need, go get me a Starbucks or whatever the hell guys would request. But he always loaded up on lobster rolls.
Oh yeah, that's the deal up there, right?
Yeah, and so we always look forward to, what the catering is fine, but you always look forward to that local treat, the lobster roll. And I didn't eat a lot of lobster rolls in eastern Oklahoma.
Right.
We had frog legs occasionally.
Oh my gosh.
You ever have frog legs?
Of course, not on purpose, but my parents, they tricked me when I was a kid and told me it was chicken, and I found out afterwards I was eating frog legs, and when you're a little kid, that's a traumatic experience.
Yeah. Have you had any since?
That's the thing. I don't even know where you would find them now. I'm not saying that to be funny, but it's not commonplace in Alabama in 2020.
Gotcha. Well, it was a commonplace to draw, almost $900 grand on ticket sales.
No kidding.
And that was a good era for WWE at that point in time, and a fun era to call matches. And I wish it could have always been that way.
Let's talk about Boston for a minute, because it really is a WWF hotbed going back as long as I can remember. I remember seeing, that famous Ricky the Dragon Steamboat Intercontinental title match where he loses to the Macho Man at Boston Gardens way back in the day. This has always been a hotbed for wrestling. I mean, even before that, right?
Oh yeah, for gosh sakes, long time. And they were a very responsive and emotional audience, were the fans in Boston. I heard a lot of stories from the late George the Animal Steele, who had a lot of heat there. Things got so hot there for the heels that they had to put a net over the ring. So the fans were throwing so many things at the ring that they had to do something to protect the talent. And so it was a really interesting town. I think Blackjack Mulligan got stabbed there pretty severely. Hey, to me, my fat ass, any stab is severe.
Yeah.
A shaving cut is iffy, but he got stabbed. Fans were just, there were no metal detectors. They weren't, the security was a different place. So it's a hot town, man. It was a good town. I got to work the Boston Garden in my career one time.
Really?
Yeah, one time, and it was the I believe. Remember when Lawler had his King's Court, the short people.
Yeah. And
I think it was that event. I called part of it. I think I called all of it, but Monsoon Heenan. What I don't remember about the wrestling matches other than Lawler's gimmick, because we traveled together all those years. He'd laugh about it, and the vignettes are fun, blah blah blah. But I dressed in a little. I guess it was the old basketball officials' locker room. It was very small, very stuffy, and very impersonal, to let the referees know this is how we feel about you. Red Auerbach psychology. And so we dressed in there. The building's not air conditioned. The garden's not air conditioned. And that was a bitch. It was so hot. Monsoon sweat through his tuxedo and, all that stuff. And Heenan was just being Heenan. But it was a very interesting day. And it's funny what you remember about things like that in your career, that both Bobby and Gino, Gorilla Monsoon, are gone. But I remember this vividly, the last, and I could hear them. And it was it's one of the great things about being a wrestling fan and being in the business. You collect memories that for whatever reason you carry with you.
Right.
And that's what's cool. Like you talked about the other day that, when little Conrad loved the Ultimate Warrior.
Sure. I
could see that. That's like the little Stingers.
Exactly.
Same deal. He identified energy-wise, and I think the face paint had a lot to do with it.
Oh, of course.
So your look was cool. So it's a sweet memory to think about Boston in a lot of ways. And that place, what's that is it an Asian place everybody used to go to there in Boston?
Yeah,
they probably still do.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And everybody wears tuxedos and the whole jam. But it's a late night spot, open real late, huge menu. And they're famous for duck. Yeah. I'm in the loop on that. I had that years ago, and there's some nice shoe shows there too in town. I visited one of those once that left quite the impression.
Yeah. Good city. Great town. It's one of the better towns to visit on the East Coast for whatever reason. I think I love the history, the American history of Boston. So it's a great sports town, as we all know. So it's a fun place to visit. This is a great audience. We had a good live crowd that night, and a lot of them.
A lot of them is exactly right. And of course they're all there to see what's going to happen. This is the 8th King of the Ring pay-per-view, and we're coming off that Judgment Day pay-per-view where Triple H would regain the world title by defeating The Rock in an Iron Man match where Shawn Michaels was the referee. We also saw the return of The Undertaker, who interfered in the match. That one happened in Louisville, Kentucky. This is the debut of the American Badass version. We just covered this in our archives. Go check it out at grillandjr.com or here at ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. But man, what an end to a show. And it's such a hard act to follow. I think King of the Ring here has its work cut out for it. And the solution, well, it's a 6-man main event here at King of the Ring for the world title. So it's a 6-man tag where whoever pins the champ is the champ. or whoever gets the pinfall is the champ. So our champion, Triple H, could lose the title without even being pinned. Those are the crazy rules that we've signed up for. Triple H is going to be teaming with his family here, Vince and Shane McMahon, to take on The Rock and the Brothers of Destruction, Undertaker and Kane. It's pretty remarkable that any champion would put their title on the line that says, hey, if you beat Shane, you take my world title. Woo.
Yeah. It was a unique stipulation that ironically put the villains in jeopardy, whereas the normal strategy is you put the hero in jeopardy just to play off basic human emotion. So I think fans were really expecting that there's no way in hell that Triple H is going to walk out of a match that featured his adversaries, The Rock, The Undertaker, and Kane, with his championship. So they were there to see a title change.
Yes, they are. And that's what they're hoping for. And we're also hoping to see the King of the Ring. This is a more traditional tournament. As you said, the most wrestlers ever in this tournament. Here, it's 32 guys. It never happened before or after. What are your thoughts of the tournament concept on a pay-per-view? This feels sort of old school. It feels very, sports centric. Like this feels like a legitimate sport when we've got a tournament, but I know sometimes it could lead to what some fans would complain of overexposure or too fast to matches, or we're seeing the same guys over and over. What say you? Did you like the idea of a tournament on a pay-per-view?
Yeah, I did. I like tournaments in general, especially when they're well booked. I guess that goes for anything. But if you get down to a really good Final Four, and that's the semifinals, I'm a proponent. If you're going to do a tournament, do the semifinals to determine who's going to go to the final match, and then the final. So you'd have 3 matches of the King of the Ring variety on that pay-per-view, and not the whole tournament. So I kind of like that deal, and I could also live with where you use your weekly TV shows to build it up and have the tournament and create your stories and create the interest in the advancing. You win, you advance, you lose, you go home scenario. So I don't have a problem with it. I kind of liked it, but I'm a tournament guy. I like tournaments. I know I had the idea one time, I think at 89 or so, would do this tournament at a pay-per-view in WCW where we had tag team round robin, and the talents didn't like it because everybody wrestled each other one time.
Right.
And so they're calculating in their head, not what the revenues it may generate or the paydays it may generate. They're calculating the fact that there's a potential I may lose 3 matches on one show.
Wow.
And that become the mantra in that regard. So that may be ill-advised. I may have had a bad idea. But when you can fantasy book, well, the Steiners are in this tournament. They're going to fight the Road Warriors. They're going to fight Doom. They're going to fight, whomever else is in the damn thing. But there's matches there that I wanted to see as a fan.
Right.
But the talents were not as happy with it because, again, they had to sacrifice a loss as if that's going to kill them. Folks, you got to remember in wrestling, I swear to God, this is true. A loss, if done correctly, and if you can't do it correctly, you shouldn't be in the business.
Right.
A loss does not kill you. Oh, I got that after Double or Nothing. Well, they beat Brody Lee. He's dead.
Oh, wait, I know what you're talking about. Are you referring to your interaction on social media with the former Disco Inferno?
Well, I wasn't specifically referring to it, but yeah, you bring that up. Yeah, he brought that up, and I responded to him. But he's just trying to get noticed and create some buzz. Yeah. I understand that too, and stay relevant to some degree.
He's contrarian, but that's sort of his gimmick on the podcast, and I guess just social media in general. But yeah, I saw where he said, everybody's buried. And to your point, after one loss, I don't know about that. Let's talk about somebody who's not losing here. It's Todd Pettengill. I can't believe this is real, but Meltzer would report Todd Pettengill on his New York radio show last week said he would be returning to the WWF to host Livewire. Pettengill replaced the older Gene Okerlund as a WWF interviewer in the mid-90s to give the broadcast what were considered a more youthful appearance. But eventually he drew a lot of resentment because he was a successful DJ outside of wrestling and was able to command a high salary during a time period when the company was losing money, and it wasn't where they are now, where they can afford to throw money around with no consequence. Todd Pettengill is the name that a lot of our younger listeners really grew up with. Like he was their Mean Gene. And, I've sort of learned from hanging out with Bruce that back in the day, Todd was not a popular guy. You know, he would drive his new Land Cruiser to work today wearing a Rolex, and tomorrow he'd pull up in his Lexus wearing an AP or whatever. But he was a very, very successful DJ outside of wrestling. And he just happens to be rubbing elbows with guys, a lot of which just got a pay cut, because in that era, when business is down, Vince goes to the non-wrestling people and says, hey, you've got or the wrestling people rather, and you got to take a pay cut. Maybe the non-wrestling people like Todd Pettengill didn't experience that. And as a result, there was some resentment. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Todd liked Todd, and he was a very talented guy. He was good. He got better at his job as he went along, because he, along the way, obtained more product knowledge, and he knew what to say and when to say it. And maybe more importantly for all of us broadcasters in pro wrestling, what not to say.
Right.
But yeah, he had a little heat on him, and he was very happy, proud of his deal. Hey, here, the thing about it is he was on Morning Drive on a very high rated show in New York City,
the biggest station in the country.
Yeah. And so they, I think his partner was Scott Shannon, longtime star at radio.
Yeah. One of the premier names in radio history.
Yeah, exactly. So they had a great thing going. And so when he mentioned you in a positive light, it was very good marketing. And of course, you got his station being listened to by more people than anything else. So the ad people, different affiliates, business associates, so forth and so on, they heard that show too. So it was a good PR move for WWE, notwithstanding the fact that Todd did a real nice job on the wraparounds. I think he would have been lost at ringside doing a match. That's certainly not his forte, nor did he ever indicate he wanted to do that. But he was a funny guy, but he thought a lot of himself, and I think that was when you come in and start talking about your personal possessions, or you demonstrate by wearing them, as you said, or driving them, when everybody else is struggling and we're trying to get back on our feet. It was daunting. But I wasn't around him very much. You know, he did all of his work, or the vast majority of his work at the TV studio, and my office was at the Titan Tower on over on Main Street, and he was at 120 Hamilton. So I didn't see him very often. I'd see him at the pay-per-views,
right,
things like that. And he was like, hey, look, Conrad to me was always cheerful and fun to talk to. He was a funny guy. He had great personality. But he was in a world. He entered into a world that really wasn't totally fair to him. That people were in kind of a downer mood at times, especially those that had been beat up on their monies.
And again, not his fault.
Nope.
He's doing his own Hey Todd thing now. I think his station gig has come to an end, so he's sort of doing his own thing online. And I tried to reach out to get him to participate in the StarCast, and I don't know he had a ton of interest, but I know in the last year he did a pretty rare appearance on one of the WWE shows on the network. And I hope we get to see Todd again. I think fans who grew up with him would like to hear from him again. And, he was there from, I guess, 93 to 97, and Livewire is a show that's on the USA Network from 96 to 2001. And I really liked those early episodes of Livewire. And there's a pretty famous clip of Red Ass JR just ripping people new ones left and right on Livewire. I take it you did not enjoy the concept as much as we did.
Well, Conrad, the deal was, it wasn't so much the concept. It was poorly produced. We didn't know how to do live interaction at that time. Equipment was not up to speed. Technically, we weren't ready to do smooth transitions from callers. We didn't have a great call screener. The producer of the show was, just to get it on the air and get off the air. For me, the issue was the fact that, I'm working Mondays and Tuesdays on the road, and some Sundays for pay-per-views. And then I come back to the office on Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Long days, because I got to catch up. I got to do payroll. And then I got to go to work on Saturday morning. So the only 2 days I had off, the only one day that I had off for sure was Saturday.
Right.
So then I got assigned that live wire show. So my issue was not as much. You get frustrated on the technical snafus. It's poor me on that deal. That's just what it was. But it taken another day that I could be home with Jan, or sleep, or rest, or whatever. Because remember, we also had house shows on the weekend.
Sure.
And I booked the house show, so I got to talk to the agent. Here's what we're going to do tonight. I want you to try this, try that, whatever. Talk to him about this. See what he thinks about that idea. Stuff like that. So you're always working, but then to have to get up, get dressed, and go to the studio was just more work, man. And I was for a while I liked it because I thought it'd be real smooth, but it wasn't a smooth broadcast. It was a little challenging to do. I think I did some of those shows with Russo.
You did. That's exactly right.
So and it wasn't him that I didn't like about doing it either. Right. By the way, so clarify that situation. Like JR takes a shot at Russo. No. It was a concept that was interesting. We didn't execute it greatly. We, as a technical group, didn't execute it greatly. And I could have been home drinking coffee and watching SportsCenter.
Let's talk about something else that makes the news here. Meltzer would report that Daily Variety was saying Dwayne Johnson was in serious negotiations to star in a couple of major films at a price of nearly $5 million per film. So, believe it or not, our boy here is about to become a bona fide movie star. This is a big deal. When you've got a guy who can branch out and make a movie for a $5 million price tag like this, that's rarefied air in Hollywood, much less coming from wrestling. I mean, as we said, Austin is sort of sidelined here. Rock is the tippy top guy. And when he starts to get these huge offers coming in, you guys in the office have to know, well, the end is near, right?
Of course. Even though Rock is still a fan, he still loves that live interaction with the audience when it can be done. He could not turn his back on that career, and he made the right decision. He's marketed himself. He's built his own brand, and so we knew that. We didn't know how long he was going to be around. We knew The Rock was never the kind of guy that was just going to bolt on you.
Right.
Where he phones Vince, hey Vince, I'm done. I can't be at TV for the next 3 months. We knew his schedule, and we knew how we had to plan. That's what I mentioned this on another show one time about, some bookers say, well, I don't want to book those guys because they got that Japan deal. Well, again, their dates.
Right.
Plan around it and use them. So that was how we looked at the Rock situation. We were going to use every date that we could that he was available for as long as we could until he departed to go make these two movies. We didn't really know how many more movies he was going to have, but golly, Conrad, you ain't got to be a movie critic. You got to be Siskel and Ebert or somebody to figure out this son of a bitch is a star.
Right.
And he's going to be a huge star. He gets the right roles, and Vince used to talk about getting the right roles. I think Vince was not comfortable with the Rock playing a gay guy. I think in a movie called Get Shorty.
Yeah, I think it was the sequel to that. Be Cool.
Be Cool. There you go. I was close.
Yeah.
And he thought, well, that's going to hurt. That hurts his image.
And let's talk about that for a minute. Back in the day, and let's just again, it's a different time. But once upon a time in wrestling, you wanted a good-looking babyface, but it was one of the sort of unwritten rules that you don't acknowledge that he's married, because you need the young ladies to show up and buy tickets and sort of, oh, he's my dream boat. But if he's married or he has a girl, well, that sort of defeats what you're looking for, right? You need a good looking, quote unquote, single baby face that the girls can swoon over and hopefully buy tickets, right? Yeah.
There was a male 18 to 49 backlash on Ricky Steamboat when he came out with his former wife and his little boy. The male demographic didn't embrace that.
Right.
Even though Ricky didn't do anything wrong, he was just portraying what he was, and that was a family man. But the defiant young male, 18 to 49, and which you squeeze that down to probably 18 to 34 years old, didn't think that was cool. It just wasn't. He's like, he's like a TV dad, and that did not get over that demographic. So yeah, you're right about that deal. Cowboy used to encourage the baby faces. That's why they had a babyface hotel in Mid-South and a heel hotel in Shreveport at TV. The heel stayed in one place, like I think the Le Bossier Hotel in Bossier City. I can't remember where the babyface stayed. I always stayed at where the heel stayed because they had more fun. But he encouraged the guys, so they split up, and then they would compare notes the next day. How was your night, and how was the bar? Was there a lot of traffic? Was a lot of women, but in other words. So that was the old promoter's deal.
So perhaps Vince's concern was a little old school, that, hey, this may run off, some future fans who were coming to see The Rock for whatever reason. Let's also mention that we've got some reports coming out of the Observer that the NCAA heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar of Minnesota has not yet signed, but there have been verbal agreements to many points of a new deal. And at the time, it's reported in the Observer that he had been recruited by the WWF, WCW, and New Japan. And Meltzer would comment that if he does sign with the WWF, it's expected that, of course, he would start in Ohio Valley Wrestling. I know that Briscoe had Lesnar in his sights very, very early. And I know that New Japan was probably willing to throw around some serious money. Was there any chance you thought that he went anywhere other than the WWF?
Absolutely not. We had him. And that we can always thank Jay Robinson, the wrestling coach at Minnesota, for his support on that deal. As I've told this story, we could have signed Brock after his junior year. But Jay felt like, as a favor to Jay, his old teammate, Jerry Briscoe, and with my blessing, made a deal that we would not sign him. I never told Vince this story because he'd want me to go sign him right away. But we made a commitment that we would not try to steal Brock from them. And so he could come back his senior year and try to win the NCAA national championship at the heavyweight division, the marquee division, marquee weight. And he did. So then, and we had Brock committed and on his way to, along with Shelton Benjamin, on their way to Louisville, within days of the wrestling season being over. I mean, literally that week type thing. So no, I wasn't worried about it whatsoever. Jerry had a great rapport with Jay Robinson. We'd built a good rapport with Brock. Brock was tired of being broke. And I remember he got the biggest rookie contract to that point. I can't speak of some other guys and later. I can't imagine anybody getting more than the $250K that we paid Brock to start out with. So he got $250,000 because he was a no miss guy. That's like saying Joe Burrow is the number one pick in the draft. He's not played it down in the NFL. He's making, his life is set with money, because that's what you do to those guys that you have high expectations for that can be big contributors. That's exactly how you describe Lesnar. We did have high expectations for him. The only thing we had to see and to know, and him too, was what kind of aptitude do you have to execute the style of pro wrestling, to business, and understand the business, and ring psychology, all those things. And Ohio Valley was a perfect place to send him because, O'Corney and Danny Davis, all these guys are there. That don't leave out names. Tom Pritchard, Al Snow, a lot of guys helped in that area at different times. But that was a very effective school. If you go back and look, Conrad, and maybe someday we do a show about Ohio Valley wrestling, and go back and look at all the talents that came out of there, it's astonishing. It's scary, in fact, that how many big-time players came out of there that went on to headline WrestleMania type events.
Well, the very next week, Lesnar would make the news again on the Observer. NCAA heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar has officially signed as of this last Thursday. It's a developmental deal that will have him starting with Ohio Valley Wrestling during the latter part of the summer. He's currently training with Brad Ringans in Minnesota and had commitments of doing wrestling camps in the early summer, and he'll start right after. So, Brock Lesnar getting started here around the same time that The Rock maybe is eyeing some Hollywood opportunities. Also in the Observer would be some news about Paul Bearer. Meltzer would write, the plan right now is for Paul Bearer to be repackaged and kept out of the current Undertaker Kane storyline, perhaps returning in an old-time managerial role under his previous name, Percy Pringle, or another name, but taking a similar Pringle-like character. Of course, we know this doesn't actually happen. How close were we to seeing Percy Pringle Paul Bearer under a different name, a different look, a different gimmick.
Not that close. Not that close. It was in the rumor mill. I'm trying to think, Conrad. I get my dates turned around sometimes. I authorized a payment for a gastric bypass surgery for Paul Bearer.
Yeah.
And, we paid for it because he was morbidly obese. We were afraid we want to save his life. This wasn't about booking or getting ready for this next TV.
Right.
Sometimes it's about life and not about the storylines. And that was kind of the deal there. But no, I don't think there was ever any serious. Bruce would know more about that than me because Bruce and Paul were closer. But I don't think there was actually any serious debate. There could have been casual discussion, certainly, but nothing serious. How do you repackage somebody that has such a distinctive look? He's who he is.
Right.
And I think so then how do you get past that perception of, well, that's Paul Bearer. What's going on? It's confusing in the marketplace. And I think that was kind of the consensus at the end of the day. It'll just confuse people. And, so that's kind of where we were with that. He didn't know, he was an iconic figure. My God, he was at the side of the most iconic guy that we probably ever had, the Clint Eastwood of WWE, Undertaker. So he had a very definitive markability, and he did, and we did do the surgery for him too. He did the surgery. He was happy to do it because I told him, said, Paul, this may save your life. So he was in.
Yeah, the surgery actually happens in 2003, but it is interesting to think about in 2000, there might be a Percy Pringle. Of course, we know that doesn't happen. Let's talk about some behind the scenes stuff that makes the news. Stu Snyder is named president and chief operating officer of WWFE on June 7th. Meltzer would say technically Vince McMahon is the chairman of the board, and Linda McMahon, who was president and chief operating officer, is now chief executive officer. So Linda is now CEO. Vince is chairman of the board, and it says Snyder, who has recent experience heading a division at the USA Network, as well as running the Ringling Brothers road tours, is being brought in to lighten the load on Linda as it regards the running the day-to-day marketing and public relations, as well as the business end. Linda will be spending more time working as the company liaison to Wall Street, and in that world, working as it pertains to stockholder relations. Snyder's role will be running the day-to-day business decisions, and he will report directly to Vince and Linda. Stu Snyder is a name that maybe a lot of us have heard, but we don't know a lot about. What can you tell us about Mr. Snyder?
Well, he also worked at Turner, and you may have said that. He also worked at Turner. Let me tell you Stu Snyder's story very quickly. It kind of describes who he is. If I recall correctly, he was not happy that he had a black limo driver.
Oh.
He was not happy that he had to ride in a black car. And that came up late in the game. Vince was not aware that this guy had some apparent alleged issues. So I didn't have a lot of time for Stu Snyder. He's one of those guys that came in, fast talked this way. Here's my resume, bing, bing, bing. And he's got all these entries in his resume. Well, there's a reason for that. Sometimes, Conrad, there's a reason people change jobs a lot, because they're not welcomed anymore at where they were.
Right.
Because you got a great job, you're making big money. You're not going to bolt from that position.
No, you're going to hang around.
You know what I mean? So, he wasn't a great guy. He wasn't a great guy at all. And he came in there and he had, again, the old deal where he had very little product knowledge. And I don't care what you're selling, man. Mortgages, barbecue sauce, books, whatever it may be.
Right.
You got to have product knowledge.
Right.
And he didn't have it. And I at the end, we found out he wasn't such a good guy either.
Whew. Wow. I wasn't expecting that. Let's talk about Linda for a minute though. I feel like a lot of fans know Linda from her on-screen stuff, and maybe they know Linda from her political stuff, but we haven't ever spent a ton of time talking about Linda working in the actual WWE business. What can you tell us about Linda, the business person?
Oh, she did great. I love working with Linda. She was, we had a lot in common, believe it or not, being Southerners. We'd laugh about how we grew up, because we grew up a lot alike, black cast iron skillets and cornbread and, country food. So she was always respectful to me. We had a couple of skits on TV. I think she kicked me in the balls one time, and fired me one time or something. Hell, I don't remember. That happened so many times. It's like these flip and flops out of the ring. There's always somebody there to catch you. So now it's not cool anymore.
Right.
It's the same old shit. You see it once, you'll see it 2 or 3 times on a TV show. But she was just really good to me. And she was really good to Jan. Jan looked up to Linda immensely as a role model because Linda was always immaculately dressed, ladylike, conducted herself, as a lady, as a Southern belle, as a business person. So I really always had and I still do, a great respect for Linda. She was great to me. And I think sometimes folks, we got to think that how do people treat you is how you should judge them, not about what you read from Dave Meltzer or Wade Keller or anybody else. If you get a chance, you can truly judge someone by your personal interactions with them. And if you can't have those personal interactions, it's not possible or feasible, then take their critics with a grain of salt, because a lot of those critics haven't met them either. They're putting everything together and they're drawing a conclusion or making an opinion. Their opinion is cool, but it doesn't mean it's factual news.
It's interesting to look back at this era. One of the things that makes the news here, Jim Ross sent all the wrestlers a memo saying they can't do any more media appearances or interviews without official office approval. There's a feeling from some in the company that they feel doing media work constitutes competition for their own website. And there had been times in the past where the WWF was far more controlling of their talent when it came to media appearances than they are now. So I guess you guys had loosened up a little bit, and if guys wanted to do something and they were reached out or contacted directly, they had the opportunity. But now you're saying, nope, that can't be. You've got to get office approval. And this is also a show that we're seeing here, the King of the Ring show, where we know that they're going to relaunch the website the very next day. So a whole new look and feel to WWF.com. And you even make a note and commentary on the show that at the time the site is getting 200 million quote unquote hits a month. I'm sure that means page views, but still it's now more prevalent than ever that, hey, wait a minute. We can make money with the website, so we better stop letting people just run out the back door and do it everywhere else, right?
Yeah, and it was an order from headquarters. I didn't create the memo. I sent it. I probably wrote it, but that was the mandated to me to inform the talents of the new policy that came from Vince. And I'm sure it came after counsel with Stu Snyder and others that we're going to relaunch the website. We don't, we want to funnel everything to that website, but if I had not been called to do it, I would probably not have thought of it, and because I didn't think it was that big a deal. I mean, it wasn't like these guys and gals are doing interviews every day. The occasional interview here and there. So I don't know. I get why they did it, but was it a deal maker? Nah, not really.
Let me ask about Curt Hennig here. His WCW contract is going to expire around this same time. He's only 42. Do you remember there being any conversation about trying to bring him back in 2000? We know he would show up at the 2002 Royal Rumble and have a little run there, but what about 2000? Was that ever on your radar?
I think probably. Curt was a very well-respected guy in the company. We were in the Hall of Fame at the same time, 2007. I thought he had the upside and potential to be one of the best color analysts ever in pro wrestling. He had a wonderful sense of humor, great comedic and timing in general, wonderful product knowledge, second generation guy, Dad Larry the Axe, but he was like a lot of guys. He couldn't get that last match out of his system. And so the issue was that he was more motivated to wrestle than he was to broadcast. And I'm sure there was a difference in money. I get that too. But the other major factor with Curt was, he'd been banged up. I think he had some back issues or something, if I recall correctly. So there's always you always wonder how long can he go, and because he was a great bump taker, and he was a big guy. He's 6'3", 230, 240. So he was a very athletic guy in that respect, as we all know. But the biggest issue with Kurt was always going to be, can he hold up physically after all these years of bumping and these injuries that he's had?
Kid Rock had recently been on Raw, and he said the word fuck, and it made air, and that becomes a news story for multi-channel news. They even reach out to Jason Bernstein, who at the time was a spokesperson for the WWF, and he says, "Hey, we didn't get one angry phone call from parents, and we edited the replay of the show so it didn't get through on the West Coast." And Meltzer would say, well, that wasn't exactly true. The F word did slip through, and there was backlash and at least some internal strife after they had been trying to clean up their image a little bit from a few years prior, doing away with some of the more sensationalistic characters. But then you have a celebrity come on and just drop the F-bomb on live TV. There's only so much you can do. What do you remember about the fallout from Kid Rock's appearance here?
It was here and gone, in and out. Kind of hit his peak quickly, got some ink, and then went away. Look, it slipped. He wasn't approved to say the F-bomb. It's just in his normal vocabulary, and he was kind of outlawish. Kid Rock brought WWEF, whatever it was at that point, much more recognition. In a positive sense, and entertain the audience in a positive sense than he, I think, hurt with the F-bomb. It just solidified his edge. In fact, he's kind of a rebel, and people love to support rebels and defiance. So I think it was it hit, boom, put the fire out, move on. And that's kind of what we did there.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with negotiations, because, and we've touched on this a little bit before, but we've got a bit of a situation between the WWF and Viacom. The trial is about to complete and closing arguments are set. And it's been suggested that maybe Viacom, the WWF, and USA Network come to some sort of settlement. As you may recall, there's definitely a power struggle of where the WWF is going to wind up. Viacom makes a big offer. And of course, you may recall Viacom is trying to pump up their old TNN station, which used to be the Nashville network that now has ECW on the air here in 2000, but they want to rebrand it and call themselves Spike and focus on men. And they've seen what the WWF has done for USA Network, and they want some of that. But after running the numbers, USA figures if it matches the bid of all the programming, it would lose $6.79 million over the next season, $6.6 million over the second season, and $4.96 million over the third season. So they're potentially, if they really want to keep it, they're going to lose some cash, but they don't want to lose Raw. They don't want to lose Livewire and Superstars and Heat. So they're going back and forth in a big way. And eventually Vince McMahon winds up on the stand and testifies that the USA Network did virtually nothing for the WWF and complained that USA greatly underpaid the programming. And he also complained about USA preempting the show every year for the US Open, the tennis tournament, and the Westminster Dog Show. And
the dog show was a big issue for Vince. Yeah. He loves dogs, but to have the dog show, which was a big deal to that audience. I get that too, but the dog show was always a burr under his saddle.
Yeah. He would, while he's testifying, claim it was stupid and archaic and nobody watches those shows. Meanwhile, Meltzer would say the reality is the dog show up until the past 3 years generally drew a higher number than Raw, and as a one-time deal was far more valuable because it brought in substantially more advertising revenue because it has a much more lucrative demographic than WWF wrestling. Now, of course, let's keep in mind those 3 years would have been 2009 and 98. So 97 and back, the dog show was the more lucrative play than wrestling. So I got to tell you, when I learned in my research that Vince testified that the USA Network did virtually nothing for the company, it sort of took me aback because for a long time, especially the infancy of Raw, it felt like this is the prime show. This is the big time show. And it was a featured part of the program. And I don't know if they didn't have the USA relationship, what would the WWF even look like here in 2000? I mean, if they didn't have Raw in 93 and 94 and 95 and 96, what say you?
Well, if you hooked your wagon to Viacom and they did what they said they were going to do, it wouldn't have been a bad thing, I don't think, because Viacom had a lot of options. They had publishing with Simon and Schuster. They had cable, premium cable, CBS Network.
I want to be clear. I'm not saying that Viacom wasn't a good option and perhaps even a better option. I'm just saying to testify under oath, hey, USA never did anything for us.
Well, I think he's talking about promos, specials, things like that. They didn't give their version of the Clash of Champions,
right?
That type thing, for example. So I think from a programming standpoint and investing promotional time, it's unlike today. I'm a big fan of USA Network, and I enjoy watching two shows on that network a lot. The SVU show with, what's this guy's name? Dick Wolf. That show's been on the air for over 20 years with my favorite female actress on TV, Mariska Hargitay. And they also got a show I'm hooked on called Chicago PD. But if you watch those shows, and I binge watch them a lot, I'm here in isolation still, that they, during those breaks, it's hard to get through a break without a WWE promo. They're promoting the hell out of it now. Raw's getting tremendous promotion and NXT and so forth and so on. So I think that's what he was referring to, Conrad. Just you didn't go to the bat for us. You didn't promote our show enough. We didn't get any specials. We didn't, and I can understand too his reasoning. Why wouldn't it have been a great idea to have a show kind of like Saturday Night's Main Event, free TV, ahead of a big pay-per-view to help to stimulate pay-per-view buys? It would have been good, but it didn't happen.
Let's mention too, because we have talked about this, as we're covering the year 2000. The gist is, USA is saying, hey, we'll match your bid for all the wrestling shows that we've already got, like Raw, Sunday Night Heat, Live Wire, and Superstars. But to your point, Viacom is offering so much more. They're offering cable distribution for XFL football. They're offering a weekly radio program. They're offering theater distribution for pay-per-view models. When you think back to sort of the closed circuit model. So there's lots of other stuff that they can offer, including, tons of other advertising through their radio stations and billboards and theme parks and the book deals like you're talking about. So there's a lot more on the table here. And ultimately, the judge is going to rule against the USA Network because USA says, hey, we'll pay the money for the wrestling shows we've already got. And that is the spirit of our right of first refusal that was in our contract. So yes, we'll match the price on those, but we can't do the other things. And the judge says, well, that's part of the deal. So WWF is going to be free to now go to Viacom, and the new contract is going to lead to a huge increase in television rights. Meltzer would write the cable contract alone increased in value from 5.2 million to 26 million. So pretty remarkable. This is a big deal. You guys are able to now really level up the TV money. Do you remember this being a cigar celebration?
Yeah, everybody was happy. We got a good deal. I didn't know all the details with it. I never got involved in it. Vince would say, what do you think? Or here's where we are, just so you'll know type stuff. But that was on a different level than me. But yeah, look, anything that made the chairman happy was a good day for the rest of us. It was a lot better to be around Vince when he was in a positive mood and with a feeling of accomplishment than it was when he was pissed off. And so, and look, again, Viacom's a monster. They own Cumulus Broadcasting, all the radio stations they own, as you mentioned. Well, I talked about Simon & Schuster, who's published my book, Under the Black Hat, now. So they're very diversified, and they can expose your product in a variety of platforms. So I think everybody was excited about the potential of what this might mean to us as far as helping continue to build our brand and get more product out there for the consumers to enjoy.
Let's talk about another talent, maybe that might be flirting with the company. Meltzer would report Raven has not signed a contract with the WWF, but sides have come to a verbal understanding, and it's basically a question of when he gets his ECW release that he'll now be coming to the WWF. There are no major guarantees, so he's going to have to prove himself due to his baggage and past, as opposed to people who are brought in with basically a guaranteed push. At this point, it's not a question of if, but when Raven starts here. He had a meeting this past week with Jim Ross at Titan Towers, and he still hasn't signed a contract, nor could he legally, since he doesn't have an official release from ECW. But he's pretty well made an agreement to start after getting his ECW release, and he'll be doing his same Raven character. Even though Paul Heyman had talked for weeks about releasing him at this point, because he's lost weight and straightened up, and maybe having nothing to do with such, the release hasn't been given and may be held up for a while. His ECW contract expires on August 26th, and if he doesn't get a release, he figures to get one before that point. So let's talk about this. Raven, quite the character in ECW, tries his hand in WCW. Bischoff holds a meeting famously and says, "Hey, if you're not happy, just ask for your release." And Raven says, "Okay, cool. I'll take my release." Pops back up in ECW, huge surprise. And now realizes, well, the writing's on the wall here. It's time to look for something else. And that means coming to the WWF. Now, while the Raven character had never been a part of the WWF, he had been there before as, I think Scott, under the Polo character, Johnny Polo.
Johnny Polo.
Talk to me about what his reputation was with Vince. I think the rumor and innuendo over the years is back in the mid 90s when he was doing that character, he became friends with Shane McMahon and maybe partied a little bit with the boss's son. Was that still something on Vince's radar, or was it more the whisper campaign about his supposed substance issues at the time?
Well, I think there was just a matter of trust for a variety of reasons. You named a lot of them that may have been factual and may not, but there's, sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. But I think it was a trust issue with him. The thing about Raven, it was never a talent issue. He had talent. He was a good talker. He's a smart guy, high IQ, and could probably been a good road agent at some point later on. He could have contributed in a lot of ways. So it was never a talent issue with Scotty. It was simply a matter that he needed to distance himself from some of his previous indiscretions. But it was never about talent. The kid had a lot of talent. We used him on TV. He was a broadcaster. He could have probably been a great manager and over time, but he certainly was not a bad worker. He got himself in real good shape. So that's kind of how that worked out. I don't think there was ever any stress that he was going to get released because, as you said, if nothing else, his contract was going to expire and he can go wherever he wanted to. But he came, and I never thought there was going to be any issues with that. He wasn't wanted where he was, and for many of the same reasons you and I have discussed.
Let's talk about somebody else on the WCW side of things. Vince Russo, it's written, would quit WCW on June 15th. Of course, he was playing hokey pokey with the company a little bit at this time, because we know he's going to be back by July doing the whole Bash at the Beach thing. But the Vince Russo experiment in WCW had not exactly gone as planned. And they had at this point tried it to do, a little bit of a combination of Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo. Given the way he left the company back in October of 99, was there ever serious conversation in 2000 about let's try to put the band back together, or did Vince just have it in the rearview mirror and that was a done deal?
I want to say that there was some interest in bringing Russo back. I also want to say that I thought that maybe he came back to Stanford for a meeting with the old man. I can't remember all the details. It was foggy for us a long time ago. But yeah, I think that he had not destroyed a bridge. He could have come back, and I think he wanted to come back. But I'm sure he'll listen to this and can correct me if I'm wrong. But there was an interest in bringing him back and see if he could recreate his magic and all that stuff. But for whatever reason, whether it be money or job description or whatever, I don't know that the job of being the head writer was available to him. And I don't know that when a guy's driven the wagon, sometimes you don't want to sit in the other seat. You don't want to ride shotgun. You want to drive. and there may have been an issue there as I'm thinking about it. But there was some interest, yes.
NBC officially purchases a bunch of WWFE stock and signs for the broadcast rights for the XFL on June 13th. NBC is going to purchase 3.3% of WWFE stock for $30 million at a cost of $13 per share, which is well under the going rate, which is $18.38. These days, the stock is, I don't know, $47, $48, something in there, around $50. Were you, in this era, there's so much going on. I don't think we've really talked about this a ton, but Austin's on the shelf. Rock is looking at making movies. Vince is getting a better TV deal to switch stations. And oh, by the way, we're starting a football league. Do you remember there being a moment where you wondered, hey man, are we taking on water here?
No, not water. Not really. I didn't have time to process everything into that nth degree. All I knew is what my job was, and it was going to be more challenging. Knowing Stone Cold was injured and healing, The Rock was obviously going to have bigger opportunities to do other things that would take him out of the WWE, out from under the WWE umbrella. My job was a whole lot more important, as far as I was concerned, to continue to find people, to find talent. And, we need to find some more Lesnars and Cenas and Batistas, Ortons, and continue to gather talent that could hopefully, quote unquote, get over.
Right.
So that was my focus. When you're going to lose Austin, if Austin and Rock are both going to become unavailable for a certain period of time, it's pretty damn simple what the talent relations guy's job is. You better go find some more stars, and you need to do it now, today, yesterday. So I didn't really, look, the XFL excited me because I love football just like you do. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I'll go to some games, what the New Jersey had a team, and all that. New York, New Jersey had a team. So, there's local football. That'd be kind of cool. Get access and, get treated good and all that. Little did I ever dream that I'd be on one of the broadcast teams, which was another dream come true. So I looked at it in a little different way because my priorities were different, and my challenges were there, and they were certainly well established and known to everybody. The pressure was on talent relations to continue to bring people in that we hope could get over to the level that we must have.
Let's mention that this King of the Ring tournament starts in late May on Raw, with Rikishi beating Shane McMahon, Bull Buchanan beating Steve Blackman. In early June, we would see Kurt Angle beat Bradshaw, Crash Holly beat Albert. We would on Heat see Chyna beat The Godfather, Val Venis beat Al Snow. Back on Raw, Benoit would beat Road Dogg, and Hardcore Holly would beat Farouk. On SmackDown, Jericho would beat Test. European champion Eddie Guerrero would beat Matt Hardy. On Heat, Bubba would beat Big Boss Man, and Perry would beat Devon Dudley. On Raw, X-Pac would beat Dean Malenko, and Jeff Hardy would beat Christian. Back on SmackDown, Edge beats Grandmaster Sexay, and Scotty 2 Hotty beats D'Lo Brown. On Heat, we get Bull Buchanan beating Perry Saturn, and Val Venis beating Jeff Hardy. On Raw, Kurt Angle would beat Bubba Ray Dudley, and Chris Benoit would beat X-Pac. Eddie would beat Chyna. Jericho would beat Edge. Rikishi would beat Scotty 2 Hotty, and Crash Holly would beat Hardcore Holly. I'm only running through all that so you understand this thing is deep. There are so many competitors, and the concept is here. Let's put some on Raw. Let's put some on SmackDown, and man, let's put some on Heat. And it's not just your traditional players. You've even got tag team guys like Bubba Ray Dudley and Devon Dudley. In hindsight, what do you think of that idea and concept to have essentially a month-long tournament and stretch it across all shows with 32 guys?
Well, it got a lot of guys exposure. I like that part of it. It created more revenue for a lot of talents, which is good, always good to boys and girls to make more money. But it was, like you said, and right on point, it was a major undertaking, but the booking was done. That's the great thing about a tournament. It's different than writing a TV where you got to create stories and you got to create new storylines. A tournament is very straightforward. It's easy to broadcast because you win, you advance, you lose, you go home, you're done. Single elimination format, so always add a lot of sense of urgency. It exposed a lot of talents on television, gave them a reason to be on television. Every match had a purpose in that respect. So all in all, it was probably a pretty good thing, but it was a major undertaking.
Let's get to the King of the Ring pay-per-view. We start the show with a very quick match, 3 minutes, 25 seconds. Rikishi gets a win over Chris Benoit, but it happens by DQ. Meltzer gave it a dud rating. I don't know. I kind of thought Benoit was going to go deeper in this thing. I think probably a lot of folks assume that. You saw it back this time for the first time in a long time. What'd you think of Benoit using a chair to get a cheap DQ here?
Well, that's what it was. It was a cheap DQ, and it was to protect him, in essence, theoretically, to not lose by pinfall or submission. Which I would have, if you're gonna put Rikishi over, then do it the right way. Benoit would have had no issues whatsoever doing the honors to Rikishi, but it was a hell of a way to start the program, huh? A 3-minute DQ didn't make that. That was just illogical to me, but because Benoit just had not yet quite gained the confidence from the office that he was going to be a solution to some missing pieces on top of the card. I hired him because I thought he could, and then eventually at WrestleMania 20, he did. He climbed that mountain and stood there as the world champion or WWE champion. So I just don't think at that point in his tenure that he didn't quite have the clout until every agent, every talent he worked with said, this son of a bitch is amazing. And Chris really was an amazing bell-to-bell performer. So I'm not high on them. The dud is probably appropriate.
Let's mention that he does a promo backstage with Michael Cole, he being Benoit, pronouns pal. And he says he does what he wants, when he wants, and no one can stop him. So we're trying to show him a little bit of an edge here. We also see a little backstage conversation with the McMahons, and Vince says he knows Linda is there, but he's going to keep his cool because he's Joe Cool. And Vince leaves after this little rendezvous with Triple H and Stephanie. Then we get another match. It's Val Venis and Eddie Guerrero. Unbelievably, Val Venis beats Eddie Guerrero. So 2 matches.
Same story, Conrad. Same story. We all knew Eddie was great, but again, there were people in the writing area because of been pound in their head that these guys that OJR signed are too damn small for us, and let's get through it, get it done, and move on, because we really don't have any great plans for these under 6 feet, 5'9", 5'10" guys. Same deal. Well, and of course that culminated also at WrestleMania 20, if you recall.
Sure. It's amazing though that you've got 2 of the all-time greats here, and we're having them lose to Rikishi and Val Venis. This one though is a better match. It gets 3 stars. They get a little bit of time to tell the story, 8 minutes and 4 seconds, and they're sort of teasing dissension with China and Eddie over the loss. I got to tell you, the whole China Eddie thing really worked for me, and I think is probably, and I don't know Vince McMahon like you do, but that probably caught Vince's attention as good or better than anything else he did, is the character work he did with China, right?
Yeah, China was her program with Eddie, in my opinion, was much better than her relationship with and competitiveness with Jeff Jarrett. Wasn't anything wrong with Jarrett, but Jarrett didn't have the charisma or the star power that Eddie Guerrero brought every single time he stepped into the ring. So I like it was a good thing. Eddie made it work. Eddie becoming very unselfish. Eddie, an athlete who came from a wrestling family, and I guarantee you, when he was training and throughout his career, he never dreamed he would be in a major program in the biggest wrestling league in the world against a female. But He pulled it off beautifully.
Well, we really got to pull something off here coming up on this show, and we get a tease backstage. Pat Patterson's in the locker room looking at dresses to wear for his hardcore evening gown match. And Pat says if he's going to do this, he needs to do it right. And he talks to one of the WWE seamstresses and designers. They don't acknowledge her name, but it's Terry. And Terry famously made a lot of Ric Flair's WWE robes. And Patterson says he needs to look better than Briscoe. And she says she's good, but she's not a miracle worker. And Pat wonders what in the hell that means. And then Rikishi is interviewed in the locker room by Jonathan Coachman, and Coach has hair. How fun is it to see Coach with hair here?
It's fun. It's fun. You know, he's another guy that's gone on and stayed pretty active and had a very nice broadcasting career, including a long stint at ESPN, and he's doing a lot of different projects now. But yeah, I saw that too, and it was first thing I noticed was that he had hair.
Yeah, it just jumps out at you. Next up, we've got Crash Holly working with Bull Buchanan, and this is on pay-per-view. 4 minutes and 7 seconds. Buchanan basically destroys him the entire match, but then he misses the scissor kick, and Holly, who was called Crash Holly by Jim Ross, this is according to the Observer, gets the win with an Oklahoma side roll, 3/4 of a star. And the reason that made note is they just introduced him as Crash on the lower third, and then by Howard Finkel, but you refer to him as Crash Holly. I don't know why people hang on your every word. It feels like we do this these days with Jungle Jack Perry.
Yeah.
Is it that big of a deal if he's Crash or Crash Holly? It's not to me.
Me neither. Absolutely not. It gives him more gives him more range. It gives him something, there's more to it than just Crash.
Right.
He's got a fucking name. And he'd been billed as Bob Holly's brother or his cousin or something. So it made sense in that regard, and as much as pro wrestling can make sense sometimes, but no, that's just, I'm with you, Conrad. Sometimes I'm amazed. I don't have any problem with people going on Twitter and blasting my ass if that's what they want to do. They got freedom of speech. I believe in it. But they die on the wrong hill sometimes, like we talked about a week or two ago about, my calling, Sonny Kiss a she, when I had talked with her and she said, I identify with both genders.
Right.
So I guess I should have gone on the air and said, hey, for all you fucking assholes on Twitter that are looking for something to bitch about, I did talk to Sonny Kiss before the show, and I may refer to her as a she in this event. Come on. That's just the wrong hill to die on, quite frankly. But it was funny, how that Crash Holly. And I'm surprised Meltzer even wrote that.
Throughout the show, there's a ton of backstage vignettes with Vince saying there's going to be no interference in the main event and referring to himself as Joe Cool. And they're trying to recap things that Linda has done over the past few months. And Vince makes a rare faux pas talking about Linda bringing back Dave Hebner. In reality, Vince, or she brought back Earl Hebner. But these backstage skits with him and Linda, I don't know, man, I really enjoy watching these. I've always been fascinated by their relationship and what they've been able to do. And it's cool to see them interact. And there's a ton of backstage Vince McMahon and Linda stuff on this program.
Yeah. And it's just all building to the main event. That's all that was. And plus Vince liked doing them. And we Lawler and I loved it because it meant basically that he would be busy all afternoon doing pre-tapes. And then he would be, then if he had a live interview, that's another good opportunity for him not to be in our headset. And then if he's in a match, it's even better. So that was a great day at work for Lawler and I can promise you.
Next up, we get Kurt Angle doing a fun promo where he says this is going to be a very special night in his life. He's going to do something in this town that's practically unheard of these days, and that's win. And he rips on all the Boston sports teams and says the teams in this town really do suck. And then he does a weak Boston accent to close out the promo. I know these days people would say, oh, that's cheap heat. But my goodness, it worked. What'd you think?
Oh, it's entertaining as hell. Kurt really started evolving as a character. Hey, look, we all knew that he was an amazing wrestler.
Right.
They don't give those gold medals away. He won in 96 at 220 pound freestyle, which is very, very challenging, tough, obviously. But his personality caught up with his wrestling skills, and his ability to communicate that personality really started standing out. So he was always entertaining. He liked doing them. Like I just mentioned about Vince, he enjoyed doing the pre-tapes,
Right.
and building that character. So good stuff from Curt.
Great stuff from Kurt, and great stuff from Jericho. Is going to do a promo where he's going to rip on Kurt Angle, calling him the king of goofy, ugly ring attire. And Jericho calls Angle the king of all nerds and the king of the 30-year-old virgins. And Jericho calls Kurt Angle a royal pain in the ass. And they get 9 minutes and 50 seconds to have a 3.25 star match. Of course, Kurt picks up the win over Jericho here. Stephanie's involved. It would be written in the Observer. Jericho gets out of the Angle slam, but then puts Angle in the Lion Tamer. When Stephanie McMahon comes out, Angle is tapping, but referee Teddy Long misses it and then takes a bump. Stephanie went to hit Jericho with the belt, but he moved and she accidentally hits Angle. But Meltzer would say she actually missed Angle by way too much, but he still took the bump anyway, being that this is slapstick entertainment and you can do things like that. Jericho then kisses.
Jesus, that's a little stiff, huh?
I thought so. What'd you think?
Jesus. I mean, she made him slapstick entertainment. I don't know. I thought there might be a better way to describe that.
Well, either way, Jericho winds up planting a big kiss on Stephanie. And, when he turns around, Angle uses the Olympic slam, and there's your pin, 3.25 stars. She did miss the spot. Angle had to make a decision, a split-second decision. The decision is to take the bump. You know, if you were giving advice to young wrestlers, what would you advise them to do in a moment like that, where the quote unquote script, the plan is they're going to, receive this devastating blow and take a big bump, but then it just doesn't connect. What should they do?
Stick with the plan unless it's so obvious that the striker whiffed. If there's no contact, and whatever, you got to react to it in a different way. But you stick with the plan, unless again the guy swings and misses entirely. But you try to stick with the plan, and I think Kurt made the right decision. Because remember, Conrad, it is slapstick entertainment.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that. Next up, Vince and Shane are in their office. Shane's complaining about how Vince can't keep his cool. And Vince says that Rock, Kane, and Undertaker can't order lunch together, much less compete together. And they're going to be adversarial and there's nothing to worry about. And then we get a shot of WWF New York, which is a restaurant just full of fans watching the pay-per-view. Mick Foley's there along with Ivory. She's behind the bar acting as bartender. And Foley says he has a business meeting in Connecticut tomorrow. What'd you think of, the decision to do the vignettes of the WWF New York restaurant? We know it's going to ultimately be a failed experiment, but it became a destination for wrestling fans when they went to New York. So showing it and reminding fans of it is probably a good idea.
Well, yeah, it's a great idea. It's great marketing, cross marketing, because people that were watching the pay-per-view or Raw or any of those broadcasts were more, I would think, more inclined to make a decision that if they're ever in the Big Apple, they're going to go to WWF New York. So I thought it was a really good tie-in, without a doubt. So made sense to me, Conrad. Made sense, a lot of sense.
Let's also mention the next match is for the tag titles. And on the May 29th Raw, Too Cool would defeat Edge and Christian to win those tag team titles. At the time, TNA and the Hardy Boys are feuding and they're added into this title match. So now it's a 4 corners elimination match. Edge and Christian here are going to regain the tag titles in this 4-way. Again, taking on Too Cool, Test and Albert, and then the Hardy Boys. They don't get a ton of time, but they get 14 minutes and 11 seconds. And this is a lot of guys. I think the traditionalist would probably say, oh, it's too many guys and a hokey idea to have this many performers and this many tag teams. But this is more commonplace, especially in this era. It gets 2 3/4 stars. What'd you think?
Liked it. I liked it more than 2 3/4 stars. Well, it's close. I'd probably give it 3 stars. All those guys, look at all the skill sets, were excellent. And I like the fact that it was an elimination match. So you didn't have a cheap one, whoever first got a score, pin, or submission wins it. That's always annoyed me in triple threat matches when a champion could come in and wearing the championship belt, but he doesn't have to be involved in a decision to lose the belt. So if he's essentially he's really not the champion in the structure of the rules, or being the champion doesn't mean anything. So I'm wondering, hell, you just probably ought to have the referee bring the belt in, because the guy that's the champion, or officially the champion, really doesn't mean anything. So I like the 4-team elimination. I'm sure some of the talents probably didn't like it so much because there had to be so many decisions rendered. But I thought it was a better deal for the fans to see this thing. It's a good story to tell. Another organic story that's easily told, like a tournament. In this situation, you got four teams, and you're gonna and when there's only one team left, they're the winner in the story.
Next up, we've got a Crash Holly interview with Michael Cole, and Crash is saying he's an overachiever. And then we get one of the semis. It's Rikishi and Val Venis. They go 3 minutes and 15 seconds. It's a dud rating. And Meltzer would say this was equally as bad as the Benoit match. This is the second time Rikishi's had a 3-minute match. Is it just, we know that fans are going to pop for him and they love to see him, but we don't really want to invest a lot of time in one of his matches. We need to save him for later if we're going to ask him to work a lot. Or is it just a function of, God damn, it's a tournament. We got to have 38 matches. We got to get through these shits. Well, what was the reasoning?
Well, protect him and not blow him up. And at that point in time, Rikishi was in the line to get a push and to get elevated on the card. So it was just a matter. He's a 350-pound guy. To put him in 8-10 minute matches and more than one in this tournament would have been stupid.
Right.
So, that was the deal. Just extend the shelf life. Don't blow him up, because they had plans for him. So that was the deal there.
Next up, we've got Kurt Angle and Crash Holly. Angle's going to throw tons of great suplexes. Fans aren't really into it though, but Angle gets a clean pin. Meltzer would say it was good while it lasted, but too short, 2.25 stars. Let's move along. We're also seeing a highlight package here that really stands out these days. It's from Madison Square Garden the prior night. And you would note on commentary, it's the 14th straight sellout at MSG, and Donald Trump is shown ringside. And what do you know it? The first lady is there at his side. And that jumped out at me. I don't know why. I didn't expect to see her there 20 years ago. Lawler even does an interview with Trump, and Lawler asks, "Hey, what brings you to the show?" And he says, "Well, Vince is a great friend. And, we really, really love it." And so of course, Lawler asks, "Well, who's your favorite superstar?" And Trump can't help himself and says, "Well, besides you, wink, wink, it's The Rock." And, I don't know. I don't know why this stands out to me, but I thought it was worth mentioning. What'd you think of this appearance from 20 years ago with, Donald and Melania?
Kind of planted a seed, right? Of, presidential stuff. And, Vince did a hell of a job, trying to humanize Trump as being at ringside with a bunch of other wrestling fans. And then I've always said that one of the reasons Trump wore his cap during the last campaign, it said "Make America Great Again," was he got the idea off Stone Cold's caps. And I believe that, because, oh my God, sure, that's a stretch. But he saw how Austin was responded to, and somehow or another he correlated that to he could be more everyday guy, and not the son of a rich real estate developer in New York City. Silver spoon, special schools and all this other shit. He could be more normal, more blue collar by wearing a baseball cap. There would never have been any time that I'd seen, maybe a picture of him playing golf, that he ever wore a cap, because he wanted to expose that beautiful flowing hair. But none of them, I'm kidding. And that being a wise ass.
It is fun though, to your point, that Lawler says something like, Trump shouldn't run for president. He should run for King of New York. And it's just fascinating that, nobody could have ever predicted in 2000, or at least I couldn't. My goodness. Then there's,
I still can't believe it.
I think a lot of us can't believe it. There's a couple of quick interviews with Kane and the Undertaker, and they're talking about how they're going to win the title. And then there's a video package for Patterson and Briscoe, but, my goodness, one of my favorite things that happens on this show is the backstage interview with Gerald Briscoe being interviewed by Jonathan Coachman. And he says that Pat Patterson stole his hardcore title, but tonight Pat Patterson's going to find out that I'm all man. And then a guy walks into the room and tells Briscoe, "Your evening gown is ready. Would you like the regular panties or the crotchless kind?" so silly, so fun. Crash actually regains the hardcore title by interfering in this evening gown match between Gerald Briscoe and Pat Patterson. And yes, if you haven't seen this, you need to go watch it. This is not make believe. Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe are going to dress up in dresses with women's lipstick. They're going to stuff their bras. They're going to wear wigs. Just silly shit. They're ripping at each other's dresses. And I don't know, man, it gets -3 stars. It's all entertainment. What'd you think watching this back? Is this some of their ideas? Is this Vince trying to just humiliate his buddies and have fun at their expense?
No. It was entertainment, man. This comedy. This is Vince's let me up segment on the pay-per-view. A lot of wrestling, straightforward, boom, 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 boom. And now this is a good match to kind of regroup. So no, he wasn't I don't think it's trying to embarrass those guys whatsoever. They were all for it. And a lot of the stuff that they did, Briscoe and Patterson did, were their idea. You get two of the great workers of all time, certainly know how to put a match together, knowing each other's limitations. They weren't spring chickens, which made it even more funnier. And then, of course, coming out in drag and all that stuff was just, it was funny. It belly laugh funny. I think Lawler and I had a blast calling that match. I can tell you that. Just so many double entendres and all that stuff. It was some fun shit.
Yeah. Meltzer right. Ross mainly did gay jokes about Patterson, such as his part-time job is doing rear end work at the body shop, and Patterson stuffed a banana in Briscoe's mouth. And Ross mentioned there was no telling where that banana had been. And there is a point in the match where Patterson tries to shove a maxi pad in Briscoe's mouth. Meltzer would write of this. I swear, our swearing Russo had secretly jumped back and gotten his job back without an editor. When finally Crash saved the day and hit Patterson with a garbage can to score the pin in the longest 187 seconds in wrestling history. Thankfully, all the old women in the front row at the Cow Palace that used to idolize Patterson no longer watch wrestling. -3 stars. This is hilarious stuff.
I just tell Dave on that one, lighten up, Francis. It wasn't intended to be a serious wrestling match.
Sure.
They're in fucking men dressed in evening gowns.
Right.
So yes, it's going to be sophomoric and a little coarse humor. And of course, if someone's that uncomfortable, then you can do a couple things. You can change the channel, which we don't want you to do, or go make yourself a sandwich.
I like that idea. Next up, we see the Dudleys backstage, and Devon is saying, thou shalt not mess with the Dudleys. And Bubba writes TORI on a table, and then they bring it to the ring, and we'll get a little video package here setting up Road Dogg, X-Pac, and Tori on one side, taking on the Dudleys. It's a 3-on-2 with Tori being the third. It's a dumpster and tables match. And the rules are, you've got to have all 3 members of DX being put through a table, or both of the Dudleys being put in the dumpster. 9 minutes, 45 seconds, 2 3/4 stars. What'd you think?
I liked it. I thought it was again, a unique matchup. It was a departure, and adding Tori in that group for the 3-on-2 made it even more unique. We tried to clarify that, DX has to, they gotta go through the table, all of them. And then of course the other guys got to be put in the dumpster to be beat. I had mixed mixed feelings on it, because this is a match that really, finished up tearing up the shoulder of Tori. She'd been hurt the night before, I think in the Garden, and at a house show, where we did have our 14th consecutive sellout. You can't say that anymore, but that was a source of pride for me. And she was a very talented woman. She had a great run in Japan, a lot of sex appeal, really good athlete, but she came to us unbeknownst to me with a very delicate shoulder. And I didn't know that. And I'm not blaming anybody for that, Conrad, by the way. It's just, she did a good job for us while she was there. But we knew that we had to take care of her from that shoulder injury, and we did contractually, and of course pay for the surgery, as we should. Just patting myself on the back because we did the right thing. But she was a big part of various presentations, and was kind of an unsung hero in WWE at that time because she was so versatile. She was an experienced female wrestler who could help the younger female wrestlers get better and have better matches. And then she had a great striking presence at ringside. She was a real special talent that probably doesn't get the credit that she deserves for the contribution she made in that. It was not a long period of time, but she was significant and substantial in a short window. So, but that's the mix of reviews. That's what I remember from that match, is that I think the Dudleys gave her a power bomb or something off the top, through a table, something. And it was just a bad night there. She had to have major surgery, put that thing all back together and clean it up. And it pretty essentially kind of ended what she was doing.
Yeah, and she does take the big power bomb through the table. It's a shame that, she's going to go down after this one. Let's mention that next up we get an interview with Kurt Angle backstage with Michael Cole, and he's promising that he's going to win the tournament, but he puts over his opponent saying, Rikishi's great if you like dancing and putting your butt in people's faces, but I'm going to win the tournament and then beat Triple H for the world title. And, here you go. 5 minutes, 56 seconds. Angle does exactly that. Rikishi does kick out of the Olympic splash before the finish. Meltzer would call it a very disappointing tail. Star and 3/4.
Three matches for Rikishi.
Yeah.
So it answers our question of why are those other matches so short?
Yeah.
He had to warm up, re-warm up, and re-warm up 3 times. That's tough to get your motor running, especially when you're a super heavyweight, as Rikishi was. In hindsight, you could certainly make a case to say, well, Kurt beat the wrong guy. Should have been somebody else. But, Rikishi was on a roll. The fans liked him. That stink face got over. His music got over. Him dancing got over. Yeah. So, and Junior Fatu had, he's a loyal guy. Been there a long time. And, always saddling the tag, seemed like. So getting a shot at going singles and getting to the finals of the King of the Ring was all a part of trying to rebuild him and rebrand him as a single star.
Kurt Angle has such a big 2000. He wins the European title, then the Intercontinental title, holds them both at the same time. He does wind up losing them both at WrestleMania 16, but he doesn't actually get pinned to lose either one. He wins the King of the Ring. And as we know, in a few months, he's going to become world champion. This is a banner year for one of the all-time greats. I mean, if he wasn't made heading into 2000, then as just a name and entertainment, he is at the end. My goodness, what a year he has here.
Yeah. And it's only 4 years after winning the gold medal. So, he was still very, very, upticking. He was elevating. He had a great year, but there were some matches he had, he was so much better, Conrad, as an athlete than anybody on the roster.
Right.
That it was scary. And people talk about the Division I, like Brock Lesnar, NCAA champion. We know I signed a bunch of NCAA champions over the years, including Kurt Angle and including, I can't remember the big kid from North Carolina State, Sylvester Turkey.
Yeah.
But Kurt started putting the personality and the sizzle with his stake, and that completed the package. So I would think that probably 2000, if you look back at all the years of the great things Kurt did, Conrad, 2000 has got to be underscored as his best year ever, because at the time, it took him to the next level, and he stayed there forever.
And he got to show, to your point earlier, the entertainment aspect too. It wasn't just suplexes. I mean, he's checking all the boxes. He's a bona fide goddamn superstar at the end of 2000. Let's get to our main event. As we mentioned at the top of the show, it's a 6-man tag team match for the world title. Leading up to the match on the June 1st SmackDown, Rock, Kane, and Undertaker would win qualifying matches to qualify for a WWF Championship title shot at King of the Ring. On the June 12th Raw, Linda McMahon would announce that at King of the Ring, Rock, Kane, and Undertaker are going to take on Triple H, Vince, and Shane in a 6-man match. On the 15th on SmackDown, a stipulation is added that if Triple H's team wins, Triple H would defend the title against the winner of the King of the Ring tournament at the next pay-per-view, which is fully loaded. But if any person from Rock's team gets the win by pinfall, then he would lose the title. And on the June 19th Raw, as an additional stipulation, it's mentioned that if a member of Rock's team gets the pinfall at King of the Ring, he becomes the new world champion. So even if Kane or Undertaker win, The Rock is the champ. We see Vince backstage with Triple H, Shane, and Stephanie, and Vince says they're going out there for a victory because the other team just can't get along. And Shane says we have to have deadly focus, and Hunter's complaining that Vince has backed them into a corner, and Vince is at his Vince best. So I'm not backed into a corner. You're not in a corner. He's not in a corner. And it's time for the match. And what a reaction that everybody on the babyface side gets. Huge reactions for the Undertaker and of course The Rock. 17 minutes and 54 seconds. Meltzer would say, by virtue of the pre-match steps, Rock, who scored the pin, wins the WWF title. Basically, the story was that the face team couldn't get along because they all want to win the title for themselves. And Triple H hits a pedigree on Rock, but Undertaker saves Rock. It's largely Triple H versus The Rock, as it needed to be, because they're the only two good workers in the match. But even
God almighty,
I swear that's what he wrote.
I read it. I saw it, but Jesus Christ, the only good workers. So you're telling me that Undertaker and Kane are not good workers?
Yep.
I can't buy that one.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that, he would say that about the Undertaker, but, it is what it is. Even though they work their usual hard style, all the distractions from the outside seem to take away from them rather than enhance them. Of course, Rock doesn't want to tag out, which is actually a strategy that makes sense because he wants to win the title. Kane and Undertaker actually start fighting each other. There's a lot going on when you've got stipulations like this. And I think it probably eliminates, traditional quote unquote storytelling. They do the big spot through the announce table. There's a people's elbow where Vince is going to go for a people's elbow on The Rock, but Rock gets up, uses the rock bottom on Vince, and then hits him with the title belt after the fact. Star and 3/4. Rock is your world champion for the 5th time. What did you think?
Wasn't wild about the stipulation. I thought it was too convoluted.
Yeah.
I thought it was too predictable. I think the match could have been, successful in a 6-man, and something other than what we did. It's the point. Here's what's my sticking point. Let's say Undertaker beats Shane, and Rock now's the champion. Is that how you read it?
Well, that's the way it felt on Raw, but I mean, it's clarified here on the show that, hey, whoever wins is the world champ. So I understand why, we even see towards the end of the match, Kane goes to chokeslam The Rock because Kane wants to be the world title. I don't know. It's just, why even bother calling it a 6-man? Why not just say, hey, it's 6 guys, every man for himself? It's just either it's a 6-man or it's every man for himself. But the combination of both just feels weird. Yeah.
It is unsettling. When you got to take that much time to explain the stipulations to your audience, and then you burden your live audience because they can't hear the commentary, with a whole bunch of stipulations and more information to process, it's troublesome to me. Fans don't want to invest that much of their time to decipher what the fuck they're watching.
Right.
So, for that, I didn't hate the booking as far as the talents in it. Star-studded as hell, but I thought the structure of the match was very convoluted and a little bit disconnecting. And of course, apparently Meltzer thought even stronger that with 1 1/4 stars.
Overall, when it came to the readers of the Wrestling Observer, they gave this show 19.9% thumbs up, 62.4% thumbs down, and 17.6% thumbs in the middle. Jim, you watched it for the first time in 20 years. What say you? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle?
I would be kind to say it's thumbs in the middle.
Yeah, I would agree.
Maybe, a little on the downside. The show was overbooked. A lot of discussions we talked about having Rikishi have to work 3 times, warm up 3 times, cool down 3 times. Probably not smart. The stipulations we just mentioned watered down in that main event because we had to keep explaining to the audience, the viewers, what the hell's going on. And that was just almost like instead of calling a match, you go, now remember, okay, here we are, that kind of deal. So thumbs in the middle, out of kindness.
The best match poll, they thought the tag team match, Edge and Christian, Too Cool, the Hardys, Test and Albert, that got the most votes. The worst match, it was a runaway. It was the evening gown match with Briscoe and Patterson. What'd you think? You think the tag match is the best match on the show? Yeah,
I do. And I would not even put the Briscoe Patterson exhibition of the evening gown thing, even in the hunt of what's the best match. It wasn't really a match. In name it was, but the presentation was vaudeville. The presentation was comedy with a couple of little slapstick stuff with a couple of little stunts involved. So I don't know. I have a little issue with that because you should exclude that, I think, from your score. It's like the Olympics. You eliminate the high score and the low score, and what your average is what it is. And that would have been the low score I would have eliminated from that show. But, I was thinking that the vote was going to be for the main event, but they didn't like that because of the stipulations. But Rock winning a title is always cool, but I don't know how much we helped Rock in that situation, quite frankly. The way he won his 5th title wasn't as stellar as you would hope the treatment that Rock would get. It's almost like, well, we know you're leaving, so we're going to put the title back on you because we love you and you're a great champion, but we're going to set you up to lose to somebody that we're building. So I don't know. It just wasn't a great pay-per-view to call. No, the audience, the crowd, the sellout, all that stuff, man, it was a fun show to do. But going back and watching it again for the first time ever in my lifetime, it wasn't as good as I remember it being, Conrad, if that makes any sense to you.
Let's mention the next night. We opened the show with a Rock interview in Worcester, Mass. Of course, it's another sellout, $331,000. But I mentioned that because, man, the thing that stood out to me most watching this show, King of the Ring, there's no Rock promo. Like, how do we have 38 Vince McMahon vignettes and we don't get one Rock promo? In this era, yes, they want to see the Rock perform. Yes, they want to see him raise the eyebrow and drop the people's elbow, but they want to hear the Rock promo. Doesn't happen at King of the Ring. Why do you think that is?
Couldn't tell you. Oversight? No, can't be. Didn't think they needed it? Probably. Because you're right. The backstage McMahon stuff dotted the show.
There's a ton of them. Like, just pull one out, slap Rock in there. Fans go home happy.
I'm with you. I agree with you, but it didn't happen. I don't know why it didn't happen. Didn't make any sense. Sometimes you can't explain stupid.
We should mention the next night, Triple H would come out and mention how he lost the previous night, but never did the job, but now he's not the champ. And then Shawn Michaels would introduce Mick Foley as the new commissioner. And Foley's going to make fun of Triple H's long, boring 20-minute promos by doing one of his own, and then sets up a 3-way main event that night between Triple H, Angle, and The Rock. But the other thing I wanted to mention on this episode of Raw is Lawler beats Malenko in a stripper match. And the goal here is whenever someone is thrown over the top rope, either Kat or Terry have to take clothes off. And they're both there in their bra and panties, meaning when Malenko goes over, Terry has to take off her bra. She does, but Stevie Richards comes out as the censor. A stripper match? Come on, Jim. Who booked this shit?
Not me. I'm just out there doing my little job of seeing what's on the monitor and trying to describe it. Vince loves the sophomoric shit, Conrad, as you well know.
Yeah.
And if you're a writer and you're an insecure little bastard and you're trying to figure out how I can be relevant, how I can be more important in Vince's eyes, then you bring him content that you know that he will like. It may not be the best for the talent. It may not be the best for the show, but Vince will like it. Therefore, he might like me more. And there's where you get shit like that. We're going to try to clean up our act. You're telling me that we're going to have a pissing contest over Kid Rock's F-bomb, and then we're having a stripper match where two of the talents are taking their clothes off? Bullshit. It's hypocritical. So yeah, that's how that worked. I believe, might be wrong, it's still that way today. Writers bring him stuff that they know they'll get minimal pushback on, so they don't have to confront, or which is not a good idea, but they don't have to debate their point. They don't want to go down any road that might piss off the old man, because he's the be all end all. He can furlough your ass, he can fire your ass, he can do whatever he wants to do. He owns your ass, period. So that's how I see that situation. And I know that's very negative, and I apologize if I'm too negative, but that's kind of how I see it. He's still the alpha male that everybody tries to cater to, no matter if they know that they're wrong in doing so.
Well, we hope we're not wrong, and you guys want to hear what we're doing next week here on the show. It's Bret Hart's 1996-1997. This is going to be a barn burner. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. I thought Bret just had a phenomenal run in 96 and specifically 97. We're going to cover it in long form. Yes, we're going to talk about the end as well. But man, that whole USA versus Canada stuff was just white hot in 97. Great stuff.
Loved it. I loved it. It was a unique idea. You never think of our friends north of the border of being the enemy. But it was so well done. And man, I remember I can't remember what the year, it was one of those 2 years. We did TV in Halifax. And there's a lot of stories about the Halifax Hotel I'll have to tell you next week. But Vince and it was the first time, I think, at least the most significant time, that Vince and Bret had an altercation as Mr. McMahon and the Hitman on TV, and where they had a physical confrontation at the announce position beside Lawler and I.
The hockey fight gimmick.
Yeah, and he pulled the hockey thing over his head, the old hockey fight deal, and man, that crowd got it. They loved it. They went crazy. And the irony of that, which we'll get into next week, was that we were staying at a hotel there in downtown Halifax, and we all walked to the arena.
Wow.
I don't know why, but we all walked. We could have had a car, limo, or whatever. I didn't care if it had been a limo, but you kind of didn't know that you were going to walk back with Vince. He's going to have all this heat on him.
Right.
I didn't know what he and Bret were going to do. Didn't matter to me. I'm just going to call it. It's a Bret Hart, one of the most respected, loved guys ever in wrestling. Highly, highly skilled. He's done a couple of things with us at AEW. I wish he was around more. I think he could be an amazingly positive influence to any talent, no matter their experience level, lack of experience, or whatever. He's that kind of guy that God, to me, it'd be like bringing, and I'll date myself here because he's one of my favorite baseball players of all time. It'd be like bringing Mickey Mantle in to work with your hitters.
Right.
It's just, or bringing your boy Nick Saban in to do a coach's clinic. He can teach you things that you can take with you for a long time. So I got a lot of time for Bret Hart. That'll be fun to talk about his career. And it's always fun to talk about Bret until you get the goddamn Montreal screw job.
Yeah. It's not as fun, but that is part of the story, and we'll touch on it next week. We should mention that we've got one hell of a July planned for you. We're going to start with the big barn burner of Bret in 96, 97, but the next week we're going to do a watch along on one of the most memorable Nitros ever, the July 6, 1998 Nitro. Of course, this is famously when Hulk Hogan would lose the world title to Goldberg. And it's worth mentioning as a companion piece, the day before that episode drops, Tony Schiavone and I will watch what was on Monday Night Raw that night, which was famously when the nation would be spoofed by DX and there was a brawl for all. So it'll be kind of fun to hear the voice of each show, watch the other show. The following week, we're going to profile Bobby Lashley and what a career he's had. Of course, we can't do that without talking about his WrestleMania centerpiece that involved Donald Trump. And of course, Fully Loaded 2000, the follow up to King of the Ring 2000. We're going to hit that one on July 23rd. And then we'll wrap the month up on July 30th when we cover the July 31st, 2000 Raw. Now, why are we covering that one in particular? This is a Monday Night Raw from the Georgia Dome. What a spectacular that must have been. We'll take a look at all of that in the month of July. And of course, you can get all those shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. And Jim, I continue to hear great feedback about our On the Road Again series with you and Tony Schiavone.
A lot of fun, Conrad. That's a blast. And I'm so happy people like it. It's just two wrestling fans that got jobs in pro wrestling, stayed in our entire adult life and just telling stories and enjoying each other's company. And I think over the years, as time goes on, that stuff will be archived and people are going to watch it for a long time because it really is. It's uncensored. We got a clue what we're going to talk about. It's just organic and natural and real. It's real, folks. Just like my website, jrsbarbecue.com is real. It's still there. The books are still there. I'm personalizing books every week that I'm in town. And we had a great, Father's Day has been wonderful. So it's been really good. I appreciate everybody's support in that regard. And I wish the damn bookstores were all open. We're going to be in Barnes and Noble and all the major bookstores are going to carry our book. But because of the rioting, because of the virus, it's kind of kicked us in the shin on that damn thing. So,
well, you can still get it's a great book and you can still get it online at Amazon.com. But why would you do that? You want the autograph version. You want to go to jrsbbq.com. And Jim, I understand not only are you autographing these dudes, you're personalizing them. And I've even seen a lot of people post theirs and your inscription oftentimes includes something about their push.
Yeah. You can tell our audience listens to our show. That audience is buying the book, obviously listening to our show. They pick up on things we talk about and laugh about and make fun of ourselves sometimes. But the push, I gotta have my goddamn push. That has been a signature that it's come to become realized on these books. So I'll write what you want as long as it's not overly profane. I might go effing instead of what they want me to write sometimes, but let's show a little bit of class. But I essentially will write whatever the hell you want. And, sometimes you find out that somebody's got a nickname or something like that, or they have given them a nickname. So it's all fun. It's all for good fun. And I'm sure that'll be a book they'll keep around because it was signed personally to them, not just an autograph, but to the individual. And as you said, personalized. And it takes extra work and it takes a little more time, but hell, I'm signing my name. I'm doing something for the fans that I enjoy doing anyway. So, I did a signing the other day. I signed 250 books and it took me 6 hours. Wow. So it wasn't like I'm just farting around here and sitting out by the pool signing books. We go to the warehouse, we sit down, we get to work. So it's it's an exercise in that I enjoy doing, interacting with folks. So, and I told you the other day that we're selling about 30 cases of JR's original barbecue sauce a week, and I'm just digging that, man, because it's so happy that Mom and Jan's brainchild is getting sampled and liked and rebought, and I appreciate that from everybody too. So enough of that deal, but it's all good, man. It's all good. AEW's doing good. I'm spending a lot of time in Jacksonville. Tony Khan was kind enough to get me an Airbnb there in Neptune Beach. And so I don't stay at the hotel. I try to lower my risk of this virus because I am in the high risk group.
Oh, you know what? We forgot to mention next week is Fighter Fest. You guys are doing like a 2-week version of Fighter Fest. And
yep.
Of course, last year it was in conjunction with the big, our old pal over at CEO. It was his big gaming thing, like a big gaming convention. Well, obviously conventions aren't really a thing right now with everything going on with the virus. So we're doing it a little differently. And instead of it being a standalone thing that you watch on BR Live, now you'll be able to tune into Dynamite next week on the 1st and the following week on the 8th. And you've got a really fun little look at Fighter Fest.
Yeah. Enhanced card, pay-per-view level card, Moxley and his new adversary, Brian Cage with Taz. I do a thing on the taped Dynamite shows. We do a recap show, Excalibur, Taz, and myself on the YouTube channel, AEW's YouTube channel. It's kind of fun, freewheeling. I called Taz out here a while back on the fact that he had colored his beard. He denied. He said they said it's just the lighting. I busted his ass. I said, you got brand new glasses, and you colored your goatee. I said, you got a makeover. You look 40.
Well, I love it. We're having a lot of fun watching you guys tear it up on Dynamite every week. We're also having fun over at adfreeshows.com. If you haven't already, join us. We've been covering some of your old classics, including an episode of Mid-South Wrestling from 1982 with Junkyard Dog and DiBiase. Boy, this is in your wheelhouse all day, is it not?
Yeah, great memories. Young JR. No JR, just Jim Ross. No hat, just a bad haircut. Can't wait.
Well, join us for all the fun over at adfreeshows.com. We appreciate your support. Until next week, and man, we're going to wet your whistle with that whole Bret Hart saga. He is at JR's BBQ. I am at Hey, it's Conrad, and we are out of time. Check us out next week and every week on Westwood One. It's Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Have you on the mister. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.